I remember going on a golf training, a program for extraordinary golf. And they did an exercise that really stuck with me. And they put the golf ball at the edge of the cup and they said, okay, you're putting to win the Masters. Now go for it. And of course, everybody walked up and we just went, tap, and knocked it in. And then they moved the ball about 6 inches away. Same scenario. You're putting to win the Masters. And everyone still walked up. And then they moved it further and further and further. And for every one of us, there was a certain point where you could see the hesitation, where instead of just stepping up and hitting the ball, you could see us stop and think about it and then hit. And about half of them would go in and about half of them would miss. So I thought that exercise was an amazing illustration of why so many of us struggle with decisions and decision making. Because what we call a decision is really just what happens in those moments where we step outside the flowing of our inner knowing, our inner decision maker, our inner intelligence, our connection to this deeper mind, what we might call our innate intelligence or our innate wisdom, the wisdom within. Most of the day, you are making decisions left, right, and center without even thinking about them. You're making no-brainer decisions. So you are deciding whether to step on your left foot or your right foot. You're deciding whether to put your weight on your left buttock or your right buttock. You are deciding what to eat, what to drink. You are deciding what to say without really deciding in the traditional way. In other words, there's no thought involved. It's just a direct flow of wisdom, of knowing, into action. That's how we're designed to operate. But there are certain things in life where, for whatever reason, we become conscious of the process, we step out of the flow, we get up into our heads, and suddenly it feels like we have a decision to make. And then instead of going back to this innate intelligence, this inner wisdom, we try to go to the mental computer, the mental calculator, and work out the odds and the percentages to try and see if this path is more likely to succeed, or is that path more likely to succeed? And we get totally messed up. And the more thinking we have about a decision, the bigger it actually looks. So how big a decision seems is actually just a function of how much thinking we've got about it. So that's us, and we've got a little bit of thinking on our mind all the time, and it's kind of happening inside consciousness, and most of the time it's kind of guided by this inner wisdom, this innate intelligence, this connection that we all have to the deeper mind. But what happens is sometimes we start thinking about it. We go, oh, maybe it's money, maybe it's something to do with romance, maybe it's something to do with the world. And suddenly we start going, oh, yeah, but what if this happens? Oh, and what if that happens? And oh, and what if that happens? And what if I do that? And what if I do that? And suddenly it's like we're carrying the weight of the world on our minds. And of course, there's no room in there. There's no bandwidth left for this guiding wisdom to come through, to be heard. And when we think about it, it seems like such a big deal. We think, oh, this is a big decision. I need to try twice as hard. Not seeing that we create it as big, and then we struggle to try to solve it because the very thing that is making decisions for us all day long is temporarily unavailable. Now, sometimes when I illustrate how thought makes decisions seem big, or a lack of thought makes them appear as they are, just part of the unfolding of our own knowing, people object. And they say, well, but this, marry who you marry, that's a big decision. Or, well, which job I take, that's a huge decision. Or, well, no, this decision is a matter of life and death. Well, Life and death is an interesting thing because, first off, very few of us have been in places where we really need to make life and death decisions. But what I've experienced and the people I've talked with who have is that actually those decisions wind up being really simple. People know what to do in the moment. There's something in us where that degree of actual danger quiets the mind, quiets our thinking, and this inner wisdom takes over, and people are out the door or have done whatever they need to do before they've even thought about it. But with the other things, with marriage or work or whatever feels like a really big decision, have you noticed that it's not a big decision for everybody? Now, what we're looking for as we explore the nature of decision making, the nature of decisions, is what is constant, what is capital T true, true for everyone, as opposed to what is variable, what is idiosyncratic, which might well be little t true for you, but isn't a truth about life. And if you explore it, what you'll start to see is, for whatever reason, things that seem inconsequential to you seem like a huge deal to other people. And there are things that seem like a huge deal to you that seem inconsequential to others. Why do we do that? Why do we blow things up in our mind and make them into big decisions? Well, one answer is we don't. Nobody does that on purpose. It's just kind of a habit of thought. But the other reason is because at some level, we believe that our well-being is dependent on our circumstances. We believe that in some way, if we make the right decision, we'll be happy, we'll be okay, we'll be at peace. But if we make the wrong decision, we'll be unhappy, we'll be miserable, we will never be happy again. And because we believe that, it suddenly becomes incredibly important whether we get it right or wrong. And because of that, we flick into thinking about it mode, which is a little bit like using a computer to solve all your math problems until you get a difficult one and then switching to an abacus. Or another analogy is we navigate most of the time by a real-time GPS. So there's something that's tuned into all the traffic systems and nav systems and has access to all the maps and secret passageways in wherever it is that we are. But then when we really want to get somewhere, when we start thinking that if we get to the place we want to get to in time, it will make us happy, and if we don't get there in time, it will make us miserable, we switch off the GPS and go to a handheld map. It's innocent, but it's the exact opposite of what allows us to function naturally, what allows us to function at our best. So when it feels like we've got a really big decision to make, the first thing that we know is it feels big because we're overthinking it. The second thing we probably can intuit is, at some level, we've bought into the idea that our well-being and happiness is dependent on something outside of us. And the third thing that's really likely is we've switched out of the flowing of our knowing and switched into our little brains and trying to make our little brains do the work of a supercomputer. Your brain may be really big, but it's still doesn't have the processing power of the biggest supercomputer in the universe. So what do? Well, remember, we're not looking for application. We're looking for understanding. And if you start to see something new about this, it will also become obvious to you what to do. So here's a simple exercise I'd like you to do. I want you to take some time now, and you can go back to your original list of big decisions that you're facing, but you can also add some smaller decisions, some things you've been thinking about, where you're wondering, do I do this or do I do that? And I want you to make a list so that you've got at least 10 decisions on this list. And I want you to word them in terms of not, is it the right thing to do? Will it work out if? Because that's a fantasy. That's a mental game. That's you using the creative power of thought to make up a future and then trying to make a decision based on the future that you just made up. I want you to word it as, do I want to? And just pick one of the choices. So, do I want to go on a date with this person? Do I want to have this for dinner? Do I want to go into this line of work? Do I want to get involved in this deal? And regardless of whether you think it's a big thing or a little thing, I want you to come up with 10 of them. Now, when you've got your list of 10, I want you to ask yourself each of the 10 questions that you've written, do I want to? And you're only allowed one of 3 answers. If it's a yes, it's a yes. If it's a no, it's a no. And if it's not a clear yes or a no, it's I don't know. Do the exercise, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so if you did the exercise, I'm going to assume that you came up with a few no-brainer yeses, a few no-brainer nos, and probably most people have more I don't knows, but it's okay however it worked out for you. That is how our inner wisdom navigates for us. That's what's going on all the time. And like in the example of the putting, when we're not thinking about it, we don't even have to think, is it a yes or a no? We just go with the yeses and don't go with the nos, and don't worry about the I don't knows. But when we step out of that flow and it starts being a big deal, now we start thinking, I need to do some sort of complex calculus to work out what I should do, instead of trusting that inner guidance system, that inner GPS.